You can hear me? Yeah. My name is Lewis Holmes. I'm an Azure Data Platform consultant, and I have been working in the kind of the data field for approximately 15 years. I'm currently a consultant, consulting into the data consultancy Red Kite. My LinkedIn is there if anyone wants to get in touch. And I'm here today to do a talk on Microsoft Fabric. Now, Microsoft Fabric is a huge area, released 2 and a bit months ago. This is one diagram that describes what Fabric is, but it brings together a load of technologies that some did exist before in things like Synapse and other ones that are entirely new, but it brings them all together under the Fabric banner. And I cannot possibly cover all of this today. So I'm not going to talk about any of the data science features, not going to do real-time analytics. I know nothing about that. Not going to do the SQL warehouses you can create in here or data flow Gen 2s. So that leaves me with a much smaller topic area. But the whole point of Fabric is it's all under one wrapper. So at the end of the month, you get one bill from Microsoft, and that bill is compute-based nearly exclusively. And then, so like no matter what you're doing inside of Fabric, if you're running pipelines, notebooks, Power BI reports, even complex models, they'll all use the same compute resource. And then when people are viewing the reports, it's using all that data from across the Fabric ecosystem. One thing I will touch on is this area here where we talk about the Delta Parquet format. In the release of Fabric, Microsoft have reworked their VertiPack engine. This is their storage method inside Power BI datasets. And it is now possible to create a dataset that refers to Delta Parquet formats as it's described there. This is a format that's been around for a while, used quite a lot in kind of data science or in Databricks. And this is it's a file that compresses the data vertically, just like VertiPack does. It's aware of data types, and yeah, Microsoft have changed their engine so it can natively read Delta files. So when you hear about Direct Lake, and I'm going to show you exactly what Direct Lake is, when you're in a Power BI report, it can go straight through all the different layers and read your Delta files directly. So that really reduces kind of latency. So I'm going to show all that in the demo. And broadly speaking, I'm going to show you what lake houses are, pipelines, notebooks, and then I'm going to tile that together with Direct Lake datasets. Before I show you that, like, be aware that this is still in a preview. There's going to be bugs in here. Like I've ran this through a few times. It's never like bug free, and because it's in preview, it's not past the internal Microsoft certifications, I guess. So I would be very cautious about using this in a production environment. But it doesn't mean you can't start using it now and start getting the idea of what it can do. Currently, general availability is scheduled for November. That's the last time I've been told. And yeah, so hopefully in November, when it goes into general availability, we can start running some production workloads on it. For those of you who don't have it already, there are 3 ways to get Fabric. If you sign into PowerBI.com after it was launched, it would have prompted you to sign up for the Fabric free trial. Initially, it gave you 60 days. That's been rolling over now. It's more than 60 days ago it was released. And my understanding is they'll keep rolling that free trial over until it does go into general availability. The other way you can get it is you can enable it on your Power BI premium capacities. So if you have a pre-existing premium capacity, the capacity admin can enable that. It has to be enabled at a tenant level as well, but you can turn it on your existing Power BI premium capacities, and that's effectively kind of free. You're already paying for Power BI premium. The final way you can do it is through the Azure portal, and you then just generate a capacity in the Azure portal, and you assign it to your workspaces. So I'm just going to go off and quickly do that now so you get an idea of the pricing and how it works. So then I'm just going to switch my display now so it's duplicating. It already is. Is the sharing still working?
Well, no. I've just seen the demo slide, seen the PowerPoint slide.
I'm going to share
There
again.
we go.
Is that good?
Looking good.
So this is the Azure portal. Just go to portal.azure.com. This is my personal account. So whilst I'll be spinning this up, it won't be up for long. And I've just created an empty resource group, and you can go off and you can provision Fabric. So I just want to do this to give you an idea of the costs. So if I search for Fabric, create, and I'm going to stick it in my Manchester resource group. And this is the bit where it decides how much it's going to charge you. So you pay for the SKUs. If you already have Power BI Premium, the equivalent SKU in Azure is this F64. So if you enable Fabric on a Power BI Premium capacity, the entry level one, you'll get the same performance as you would do if you provision this in Azure. And be aware, if you do provision one of the lower ones, you don't get some of the benefits of Premium, like sharing to unlicensed Power BI users. If you do get one of these lower SKUs, then everyone you share stuff with will also have to have a pro license. I think I've got it right.
We're saying you can pause Fabric capacities as well.
I'm coming to that yet. So
You're up next week, Johnny.
yeah. So I didn't give it a name, so that's why it got upset. So let's choose that. Okay. And just create that. It'll take 30 seconds or so to go off and do that. Yeah, and I wanted to do this to illustrate the fact that those numbers there are more expensive than the Power BI Premium numbers for the equivalent SKUs. But if you mention that to Microsoft, they will point out that these capacities can be scaled up and scaled down at will, and indeed paused and resumed. So when you buy Power BI Premium, you buy it for a huge chunk of time, generally a year, I think. But when you provision Fabric, you've got this button here where you can pause it. If you do pause it, all the compute workloads you're doing in your capacity will no longer run. But my understanding is any data you and down is as easy as going in here and then choosing your new one and resizing it. So now I have the capacity, I can go in Power BI and create a new workspace. So I'm going to call it PBI demo. And then under advanced, you can say whether you want to have it on the trial, or you can choose Fabric capacity, and then that one I've just created appears. So you can assign it to a specific capacity. Now, when I was running this through today, I ran it through on this F2 level capacity, and whatever this is less than what you get on the trial, because things are running like a little bit slower. So actually now I'm here, I think I'm just going to provision this on the trial capacity so things run a bit quicker. But yeah, if you did create one in Azure, it would just be listed there. So we have our workspace now, and it's empty. And what I have in my folder here, I have some data files. So I have some products and some sales, and let's open those up. So we've got a products table, so product ID, these are CSVs, name, category, nothing too complicated. And we want to load that in the model, and we want to show that against our sales. So we have some sales for July, sale ID, we've got a date and time actually. And we have the unit price and the quantity and the product ID. So you can imagine this is going to be a very simple data model where we're just going to connect those two tables together. But we need to get them into Power BI. So the first thing we're going to create is if we go to new and show all, we get all the lovely new toys you get to play with. And I'm going to create a lake house. And I'm going to call it Lake House. And that'll go off and it'll create a few items in your Power BI workspace. So that bit's provisioned already, but I'm going to go straight back here. And it's still creating things. So let's give it a second. So yeah, that's good. When Fabric was launched all those weeks ago, they moved the lineage part of it to be a lot more prominent. So all the items you have in your workspace, you can click on this lineage view, and then it will show you everything in there and how they kind of relate and connect to each other. So when you create a lakehouse, you get these three elements here. You get a data set. This will show you and allow you to connect to and create a report of all the tables you have registered in your lakehouse. And if you do this in the right way, which we'll be doing, your reports will go straight through into the lakehouse and just read your Delta files. In the scenarios where you're writing some complex logic, some DAX formulas that you can't figure out how to just read it from the Delta files, it will convert it into a SQL statement, and that's why we have this SQL endpoint in the middle. So we have these three elements, but what we need to do is get some data in the lakehouse first of all. Super. So let's go to my lakehouse and open it up. So as I've mentioned, you need to get your data registered as a table in the lakehouse. At the moment, it's empty. These tables are Delta format tables. So it is possible to create shortcuts, and I'll go into that. But we're going to create some processes now that are going to load the CSV files and convert them into a table. So there are a few ways to get the data into this. You can click on this and you can upload. One nice tool that Microsoft has released is a extension for Explorer. So you see OneLake here. I've installed the extension. This is showing all my Fabric workspaces. If I just sync it again, my new workspace has appeared. And I can just go into the files area and I can paste my products table. Then if that synchronizes quickly, it's appeared. Super. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a pipeline just to convert that products data into a table. So you can do that straight from here by doing a new data pipeline. For those of you that have used Synapse Analytics before or Azure Data Factory, this is what pipelines are to a large extent. I'm going to call this ingest products. And because I've created it from the lakehouse, it will take me straight to a wizard. And all these different connectors, again, they're pretty similar to what you get in Data Factory and in Synapse pipelines. But now we have the option to load data from the existing lakehouse. So we can select the lakehouse, go into there. It's asking us which one. So the one I've just created. And then are we going to load data from a table or a file? Well, it's going to be a file in this case. And if I click on products, it will automatically go off and it's going to parse that and it's going to figure out the schema. So it's already figured out the first row is a header. It's figured out all the delimitation of it. And it's come out like this. So that looks pretty good. We go to the next stage and we're going to write that data back into the same lakehouse. But this time we're going to do it as a table. And we're going to say products. All looks okay. So I'm going to do next. And I'm not going to run it straight away. I just need to change a couple of things. So again, if you use the Data Factory, this is very similar. All the options are pretty much the same. I'm going to give this activity a name. One thing you have to be wary of is when you're creating relationships later, your data types need to align. So I just need to go in the mapping here and tell it that this product ID is an integer. But apart from that, I think we're looking good. So I can just save that. And if you wanted this to run on a schedule, you can set that up through here. But I'm just going to run it one off kind of manually now. So that's going off. It takes probably about 30 seconds. And if I hit refresh, you get the same kind of debug information as well. So you can see the inputs. You can watch what's going on. Probably nothing. And it looks like it's actually done. So yeah, there we go. So that has ran through and it's taken that CSV file and loaded it into the lakehouse as a delta. So going back to the lakehouse now, you can see now it is there, it's registered. And if I click on it, we can see our products data. Cool. When Fabric was released, Microsoft made a big deal of the OneLake and the fact you can share data across your organization. So if you have bits of data that are kind of in different business units, you can still reference them and use them in your lake houses. And the way you can do that is by creating shortcuts. And you can create a shortcut to a file or to a table. You have the option in both. But say you've got a bit of master data somewhere else you wanted to load, you could go and do a new shortcut as a table. And it asks you, are you going from OneLake? And indeed, if you had some Delta data saved in an Azure storage account, you can just register that directly from here. So the Delta doesn't have to be created within Fabric. You can reference external Delta tables. I'm going to choose OneLake because I created a dimension lakehouse in a different workspace. And that's telling me I can go into tables and I can see dates. So it seems like a good idea to have kind of one version of something like dates, so no, everyone's not recreating it the whole time. That's okay. So if I just create that, it will go off, and it's not going to create a copy of the data. It's just creating kind of a reference to it. And that shouldn't take too long. And now you can see the icon's slightly different. And then when you click on date, we've got a pretty standard date dimension thing. So I'm just going to jump back to the workspace now and show you how that appears. Now we've got some different elements. So the pipeline we created to ingest the products is up here now because it's related to the lakehouse. And it's also showing this lakehouse that's in a separate workspace. It's showing it here because the date is being referenced by this lakehouse. So now we have some products and some dates. So I'm going to bring in the sales data. So I'm just going to copy that from my file here. Sorry, I want it as a file. And that now should be in the lakehouse almost immediately. Cool. And yeah, I'm going to create a notebook to do this. So for those of you who've used Synapse notebooks or Databricks, it's pretty much the same concept. You're writing PySpark. And this, I appreciate we're straying pretty far away now from Power BI, so I'm going to keep this fairly simple. But yeah, like it's already realized we want to reference data in the lakehouse. And I can say, have a look at my files. We've got our sales data. I can drag that onto there. And I can run that. And because it is a Spark job, it's spinning up a cluster, but much quicker than Data Factory does this, 3 seconds. And then in a few moments, we'll get a preview of the data down here. So the first thing I'm going to want to do, I'm going to transform the data slightly here because I've got unit price and quantity, and I want to multiply the two together. So I'm going to attempt to write some of this code on the fly. So with PySpark, you can do dots, and you can keep adding and adding and adding. But so it doesn't get so long, it kind of overflows. I'm going to do a new line. And I want a new column of total price. It's going to be unit price times quantity. And if I didn't mention it at the start, I mentioned it again. This isn't best practice about data engineering or data modeling or anything. If you are a seasoned data engineer, this is probably horrible. But as a proof of concept, you can see how to get data in. So the way I've been referring to columns is you just need to wrap it in a function to say the column unit price times the column quantity. It needs to know about this function column. So I'm just going to copy that from my notes. There's a few functions I'm going to want to use. So I'll just stick that at the top so it will cover it off for the other ones. And now we've got total price here. You can see it's come out as we've got some floating point stuff going on here. I'm just going to tell it explicitly what data type I want this all to be. And I think that should resolve that. And the next thing I want to do is I can't create a relationship based on this column. I need to extract the date portion of this. Now, I'm just going to take my code for that, because in the middle it needs to convert it into a timestamp, a Unix timestamp. So yeah, we get the sales date time, we're telling it what format the field is in, and we're converting it to a timestamp. And then once we have the timestamp, we can say we're going to bring it back to be a date, telling it it's a date field. And if all that's gone well, lovely interface there, but then we have our date field here, which is matching up with the date that's referenced in this column. So instead of bringing through this sales date time now, and I want to reorder the columns a bit, and I want to be explicit about what data types everything should be. So that's where this bit comes in. I'm going to say then right there. So we're taking our data frame, and in Spark everything works in data frames. So this is a variable data frame, and it reads it from the file, and then it's doing these other operations, and the result of that's being saved in here. And then we're referring to that again, and we're just telling it pick these columns with these data types and put them back into this variable. So if I run that now, we get a much kind of neater view of the table. And this is the thing we're going to want to write and save as our Delta file. So instead of displaying it now, we're just going to want to write it. So I can do df. So we're going to write that all the data that's in here, we're going to write it. We're going to overwrite anything that's there. We're telling it it's going to be Delta and it's sales. So now if I execute this, it'll have a few more steps now because it's not just showing the data, but it should be pretty quick. Getting there. I've never been able to understand all this output it gives you. But one of the things it did in Fabric was it changed. You can rename stuff from here now, which is really good. I'm going to make this ingest sales, and that's now renamed. But back in my Lakehouse, we now have our three tables. We've got sales. So that notebook's ran, and the output of that, yeah, that's fine, is showing up here. So now we have our three tables registered, all in the Lakehouse, all as Delta. We can create a data set. Now, going back to our lineage view, the only thing different now is we have our sales notebook there. And when you create a Lakehouse, as I said, you get the SQL endpoint, and you also get a default data set. And if you click on that, it will include all the tables you have registered in your Lakehouse. And you can go off and create a report against this. And but none of those tables have relationships. And with the default data set, I've never been able to define that. Perhaps we can come back later with some insight on that. But the way I've resorted to doing this is you can go back to your Lakehouse and you can create a data set from here, a new Power BI data set. And this will allow you to create the relationships and edit it. So we want all of our tables. What do we call that? Sales. Where did they go? Okay, so that will go off now and it will create a new data set alongside the default data set. And again, it shouldn't take too long. Cool. And it's taken us here. So I can just hide that. So now we can create the relationships. So we can say our date column relates to date. and we can say our product ID is product ID. Be careful, it does the one-to-many the right way around. It doesn't seem to validate it. When I did it before, I did it the opposite way around. But here we've got, that's all looking good. And like for a thing that's in the Power BI service, we still have a few options in here. We can tell it the format of the date field, so it's going to look nice for us. We can tell it that the month name will be sorted by the month number, because that's a thing that always goes wrong. And we can create measures. So I can do a new measure. I can say total sales is the sum of that. And again, I can go in here and I can tell it its currency, and I can tell it 2 decimal places, just like you can do inside Power BI. I'm going to rename this to be our. I thought I did rename it. Anyway. We call it sales. So now if we go back to our workspace, we should see this extra data set. We've got sales, and then we have the default data sets. And the thing I wanted to point out to you is if you go to any of these objects now and go into advanced, these are in direct lake storage mode. So any reports you build off this data set referencing these tables, they're all in direct lake, which will mean in the workspace, any report built off this data set, this data set itself doesn't need refreshing. It doesn't contain any data. So you can build a report off this. It will go through the endpoint into the lakehouse, into the Delta tables that exist there, and it will query it. Super. So now I'm just going to try and create a report off this.
You're not going to wipe it first.
No, this is going to be the most basic report you've ever seen. So I'm going to bring in my product category probably, make that a slicer, make it one of those tiled ones, something like that. Then bring in date, and then also our measure that we created. And this becomes a line chart. And we have some data in here. And all these relationships are working between the date dimension and the product dimension. Everything switches round. So in order to illustrate direct lake, I have some more sales data. This is only to the 30th of July. So if I go back and I've got some data for the first couple of weeks in August, I can just put that in there. First of all, I will save this. And perhaps I just open up a new window. So we can go back to our notebook. That one. We have our sales notebook. Open this up. Now, these notebooks can be scheduled, and you can also call them from inside pipelines. So you can use the pipelines feature as orchestration almost. You could have a series of notebooks, then the pipelines call each one in turn. Or you can schedule them through here. There was a button somewhere. But for the time being, I'm just going to execute this. Oh, first of all, I'm going to change this. So at the moment, it's referencing one specific file, but you can do wildcards. So it's going to pick up all the sales files that are in the lakehouse. So running that doesn't look very good. So let me close that tab down and open it again. From here. Some workspace. Oh, I didn't know it did that. So you can see when other people are using it. So it still thinks I'm in the other session. Can I? Okay, so this is bugging out a bit now. As I said, it is in preview, but it won't let me run this unless it's a new session. Panel connection closed. Okay, that's disappointing. But the idea is you would run this, and then straight away in your reports, you can hit refresh, and you get the new data. Oh, did it change? Did it work? Oh, right. There we go. So,
You've got a little guy in the background actually doing all the work.
yeah. So, yeah, and one of the things I'm going to mention is, like in a real world scenario, you probably wouldn't want to process all these sales data every day. It could be really big. So the approach I was imagining is that after you ingested these, they will kind of go away somewhere like they're archived, and you would just get kind of the daily data. So then we could go back, and I did have a file that was just for August the 19th. Now, if I stick that in here, all we have to do is tell it not to overwrite, but to append the data. And now running that again should just load that data for those sales that came through on the 19th of August. And this seems to have repaired itself as well. So it's running the jobs. In Azure Data Factory Pro, supported in Fabric, so hopefully it will at some point. So then you can imagine a situation where the file just lands from somewhere else, then this kicks off and runs, and then the person in their sales report doesn't know any difference, and they just get a new thing at the end of the report straight away. And then in that vein, the direct lake data sets, this report is accessing data all the way back here and some of it in other workspaces, and no refreshing needed apart from processing the data into your lakehouse. That was essentially my talk in a nutshell, but I'm sure there's plenty of questions that I'm happy to answer. Any questions? Download them, can you? No. Yeah, that's something we don't know how they're going to handle yet, because you can load the report up, but it doesn't let you download it, does it? Download this file. There you go. I'm not sure which account I'm signed into on Power BI Desktop though, so this might be interesting. So then presumably the data source of this will be the data set that I created, and everything will carry on working, and therefore you can I've seen a lot of organizations say PBIXs in different kind of versions, so that's kind of something you could therefore do. Yeah, this is. I spend a lot of time doing this. This what was happening before with Teams Desktop for me, so maybe it's not going to sign in. I have paid my bill, but yeah, I think we get the point. I didn't think you could download them, but but there we go.
I'm guessing because it's you've created that data set, what you could do is instead of creating this report there, you could maybe open desktop and then connect to the data set directly from there.
Yes,
And then
yeah,
publish it to your workspace.
absolutely. Yeah, I have done that. You open Power BI Desktop, you go and you want to connect to data. I think OneLake's now an option, and then it shows you all the stuff that's in OneLake, of which these data sets will appear.
Question. So with ADF, you can export the architecture into like a long file and then edit it as code. To what extent do you know that that's possible with any of these features?
They have got Git integration for all of this stuff. It needs to be a DevOps Git instance, but you can plug it in.
Okay.
I've not played around with that.
Yeah.
All I know is that.
Possible, yeah.
To get
Yeah.
inspiration only works, believe it or not, it's stupid. I mean, get inspiration that works at the moment. Power BI gets inspiration, which is one thing that didn't used to exist. The data factory get inspiration doesn't work yet.
Right. Okay.
So you can't do that. You've got the in ADF, you've got the JSON pane that you can expand,
So
and it's read only. You can't edit it either.
you just copy it into the.
But by all accounts, the Git integration should be happening by GA.
Sure.
So you've got some kind of framework, you've got source control, something else just like point it. I didn't actually see it. It's not there yet.
Thanks, Johnny. I thought it was. So, yeah.